Roll and Sword, welcome back. Congrats on finishing the book of Ruth. Today, let's jump right in because I got a lot to unpack for us in this small book, our big implications. Ruth, it takes place during the days of the judges. We read about that about a week ago, depending where you're at in the plan. But when Israel was spiritually unstable and morally chaotic, hashtag America, hashtag the entire world in 2026, 2027, 2028, whenever you're watching this. But instead of showing national collapse, Ruth zooms in on one grieving family, on one foreign widow, and one quiet act of covenant faithfulness. The book moves from famine to fullness, emptiness to redemption, and loss to legacy. And at its core, Ruth shows us this, that God can be working through ordinary faithfulness long before anyone realizes how big the story actually is. Ruth begins with loss, but it ends with legacy. Y'all ready? Let's zoom into Ruth chapter 1, verses 16 through 17. Ruth refuses to leave her mother-in-law Naomi and binds herself to Naomi's people and to Naomi's God. You know, I've heard it said this way, real faithfulness stays when leaving would be easier. Loyalty is actually costly. Loyalty isn't this modern thing that we have going on now of like, I'll be your friend, I'll be your family, as long as it's convenient and beneficial to me. Loyalty is the opposite. Loyalty is, I will stay with you no matter what it costs. That's what Ruth was like to Naomi. Ruth, she was a Moabite widow with no obvious future. She had a mother-in-law who did not have a husband, who was too old to have any more children. And even if she had more children, like Naomi, was talking about, Ruth would have to wait decades before she could even marry somebody. Then Ruth would be old. It's just like Ruth, she had no obvious future here to have a family. Yet she chooses covenant loyalty over self-preservation. Self-preservation is the mark of the West right now. Self-preservation is a mark of modern Christianity, if I'm going to be honest. We have so many bunker-building Christians out here in these streets and in these hills in rural America that are so concerned to preserving their lineage, they will not be loyal to the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. But Ruth shows us that God can build a future through one faithful decision. One act of small obedience can blow open a whole story. And I love this, that Robert L. Hubbard Jr., scholar, he points out that Ruth's loyalty is not just emotional attachment, but covenant-shaped commitment that sounds like a formal oath. Let's be real, a formal oath. You know, what looks like a promise may actually be a sacred surrender. We need to get back to oath-level loyalty in the church. We need to scrub away this surface-level, just fake friendship stuff. We need oath-level loyalty. Let our yeses be yes and our nos be nos. And as we move on through Ruth, one surprising detail is that Ruth clings, the Bible says, clings to Naomi using language really often tied to deep covenant attachment and lasting commitment. You know, Ruth, she's not just being nice to Naomi. She is attaching herself to Naomi's future, to Naomi's God, to Naomi's people, clinging in the Hebrew context. It was a covenant. It wasn't just like, ooh, I just need to stay with you because I love you, because I'm dependent upon you. No, it was a covenant made by Ruth. She is declaring today, Naomi, I'm staying with you no matter what. And as the story unfolds, it paid off. Boaz later becomes a redeemer, protecting Ruth, restoring Naomi's hope, and preserving the family line. The thing about a redemption is it's not abstract. It shows up through costly action for someone else's good. Doesn't that sound like Jesus? Like the Redeemer of all redeemers? You know, we can't be somebody's redeemer, but for what my Bible tells me is that the Spirit of God, the Spirit of Christ, the Spirit of the Redeemer lives in me. So we get this opportunity to live as embodied redemption. And the story ends in Ruth becoming the great-grandmother of David, placing her in the line that leads to Christ himself. Talk about redemption. But let me zoom back to beginning. God, he takes what looks like an ending and turns it into a doorway for redemption, loss into lineage. She lost her husband, and God gives her a new husband. She lost her future, and God gives her a new future. You may not see the whole story yet, but faithfulness today may be carrying the future God is building for you tomorrow. I pray that's encouraging for you today. Congratulations on finishing the book of Ruth. Love y'all. See you in the discussion room.